I'm still with Victor from Curo. He is the group chief executive. Victor, you've just telling me off air the correct pronunciation of your name. Do just briefly explain the history and how it should be pronounced, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, of course. There may well be a few Portuguese people that are listening in. My heritage is Portuguese. The way you would say it in Portuguese is de Cunha. So if you really want to struggle to say it, you'd say de Cunha. But I've got used to people saying de Cunha, so I will accept either.
Thank you for that. How did a man from Portugal end up sitting in Bath then?
Well, because I'm driven by social housing, and the job called to me 10 years ago, and I haven't regretted it ever since. It's a passion. I do induction for colleagues, and we have 600 colleagues work at Curo now. And during that induction with all colleagues, I often talk about my journey into housing. And like many people, you know, I came into social housing completely accidentally. It's not one of the things that your career advisor tells you at school. But I say to colleagues that I am blessed to be able to work in an organisation that does things that resonate with me in a really powerful way. So in a sense, I never feel like I come to work because it's something I love doing, and it's something that I know benefits society so greatly. So there you are. That's
a very nice feeling to have as well, isn't it, when you walk into work like that? On that then, and I know we've already talked about the weighing up of commercial against social responsibility, if you like, with the kind of organisation that you have. How do you find mixed use? I know there's been a mixed reaction to it, if you like. But do you think that's been fairly successful, mixing the kind of build that you have on new projects?
Do you mean the different types of tenure?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's essential. I mean, if you walk down any street in this country, you will have a mix of tenure. You just don't know it, you know, because each house will have a different person inside. Some of those houses have been bought, probably some of them bought from ex-council through right to buy. Others will be rented through landlords. Every street in this country has a mix of tenure, and so we don't even notice it. In new developments, it's essential that mix of community is there. That's what creates a vibrant community, is a different group of people living together is essential. More than that, I think we have to build and create locations that have the infrastructure, like the shops and the schools and the things that people need. So you don't have to get in your car and drive for miles and miles and miles to get basic essentials. And so, you know, I go beyond saying it needs a good mix of tenure and different types of household. It needs a good mix of social and physical infrastructure to make communities really, truly sustainable.
It's interesting. We've got Radco, who have obviously relocated out of where they were in Radstock. They're going to come back in, and the planning proposals are indeed a mixed use there. And I wonder if it's going to encourage us back to a drive towards locality as well, and local shopping, local commerce, simply because things are on your doorstep rather than going out of town.
I think that all planning should encourage what's now more and more becoming known as the 15-minute neighbourhood. And this is the concept where local people should be able to access everything they need for day-to-day living within a 15-minute walk or cycle. I think good planning would encourage that, would incentivize that. And it's a shame that many of our high streets have slowly deteriorated because the infrastructure is just not there to sustain it. And that's either housing or schools or other things that bring people together socially. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, is to encourage sort of an integrated thinking around how we create places where people want to put down roots, where people create social networks, and it's sort of almost like a self-fulfilling community development arrangement. I absolutely agree that should be how we should develop communities and how we should plan for future ones.
That's interesting. I speak to Bath and North East Somerset Council on a weekly basis. I spoke to Joanna Wright last week, who of course is jointly involved for transport across that area. They're driving the locality as well. I've spoken to Tim Bowles, also of West of England Combined Authorities, the mayor for them. I know they have the same strategy as well. So do you work quite closely with local authorities in terms of driving that 15-minute neighbourhood principle?
Yeah, one of our strongest networks or connections is the connections of local authorities we work with, because we work with them in all sorts of different levels of their organisation. We work with them at a practical level. We work with them in day-to-day service deliveries, making sure that when we're, cleaning communal areas or changing bins, that we're trying to synchronise with services they're providing, right through to when we're planning and thinking about new developments. We're working with them. They're really critical partners. And the same goes with the WECA mayor, the mayor's remit around particularly placemaking is part of the framework we have to work with. So we have to work, and we enjoy working with these strategic partners because they are part of the way that we try to make ourselves successful. It's really, really important. The point, though, around how we connect places is really key because, as you know, the Southwest and where we operate is often connected by small villages, and the infrastructure when I'm talking public infrastructure, isn't that well developed.
Yeah.
And so, we encourage more and more people to get in their cars, don't we?
We do.
Because of that. And so you have either choice, which is you either build communities so that longer term they have everything they need locally, or you invest in public transport. Ideally, you do both, don't you? But at the moment, the preponderance that for using the vehicle in more rural communities, I think, is a shame, because we could be creating local communities that are much more sustainable if we invested in the longer term so they had things they needed more locally.
I think that's a very interesting point you make there, Victor. I've spoken to Radstock's local mayor as well, Rupert Bevan, and funnily enough, Jacob Rees-Mogg on this subject, and the railway station shut down in Radstock after beaching in the 60s. And part of the problem I think North East Somerset residents have is that if they look to move here because of economically far better house prices, but then look to commute into Bath, it's either a difficult bus service or it is a car. And maybe that locality and the 15-minute idea will, as you say, encourage people to actually work and live and shop and do things of a social nature more locally.
Yeah, and part of the mayor's regional transport strategy, and hopefully one day regional housing strategy, should be thinking about those things strategically, about how we invest in public transport between main cities and rural communities, so that when people need to travel to main cities, either for work or because they need to get connected to regional transport hubs, it's going to be principally through public transport, and we don't put pressure on cities because we're all driving to the city in order to get connected to other main cities. That's the art of good planning, is thinking longer term strategically about how you connect places, but knowing that ultimately to make places successful, you have to invest in the infrastructure needed locally, so that people only move to other locations when they absolutely need it for other things they can't get locally. And I think that should be the vision. That should be the way that we frame our strategic thinking on placemaking. And I know I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of people that think about these things, that agree that this should be the direction of travel. Interestingly enough, the pandemic shows that a lot of people now have come to realise they value their own spaces. Their home is so much more precious than it used to be, because it's no longer just a place you're living. Very often, many people now are working from home, and a lot of people are choosing to exercise the point you're making there, to move to outside cities. So you can see actually there's even potentially for more pressure for people wanting to come out of large cities, developments into rural localities. And the only way you can do that is obviously for a degree more housing, albeit I know that is very often a bit more controversial, but also investing in place and infrastructure, so when people are in these smaller rural communities, they have what they need.